Good evening, everyone. Welcome to my reality. Try to pan this out a little bit. There we go. This video is late at night. It's about 10:45 according to my clock here on the Pacific Northwest, West Coast time, Pacific time zone. And it's a little bit later than usual. I don't do videos at night very often. Sometimes I'll do a rambling rant in the evening on my cannabis channel or something, but I generally speak when I'm fully coherent in the morning, and by the end of the day, I've gone through so many different phases of being. There's the waking up phase, and in Ayurvedic medicine, like in India, they balance what they call the three doshas. There's Vata, Pitta, and Kapha, and they're all three different, not only body types of humans, but different times of the day. They've kind of divided everything up into categories. So the morning is time for the lungs, and then you go on to the heart, and I can't remember the specifics. But the point being that different phases of the day give us different insights, at least if we're willing to acknowledge it. Now for me, I've been monitoring this for only about just a couple of years now. And I've always been aware of the fact that we have different feelings or different, different states of mind throughout the day that tend to repeat each day. And when I started to acknowledge that, it was through the realization of seasons, rather that we have seasonal anxiety or seasonal depression. And I was really thinking about that today, how depression, seasonal depression or seasonal anxiety disorder can become, let's just say it kind of sucks. If it's winter and it's cold and it's rainy and you're bummed out, you're not getting enough sunlight, and you're just not quite as excited as you are in the summer. And when I was younger, I thought, well, I'd like to move to a warmer climate where it's warm all the time. But quickly I realized that that would be a horrible idea, because if I moved to a place like, say, northern Alaska, it would be horrible, because I need my normal sun routine. If I moved to a place like the equator, where it was sunny, more or less, all the time, I know there's a rainy season, and every area has their own seasons, but some areas are more or less mild all the time. There's nothing to expect as far as cold. Here we can go from snow to 75 degrees. That variation in climate is what drives me, just like the variation in my daily routine. But this extends to each year. I have different feelings in the spring, and in spring, sorry, taking for so long to get to the point here, which is about epiphanies or awakenings. Now, in Buddhist culture, they call it the satori, or it might be considered a there's a few other words for it, but you call it the epiphany, the awareness. What it is it's a miniature enlightenment, because all of these words are basically just described by humans to describe a feeling they had. How do we know if one person's satori was the same as another's, or if one person's epiphany was really an epiphany or just an idea? And what is an epiphany in itself? An epiphany, I guess, would, by definition, I believe, is a sudden realization of something that maybe is very profound and moving. And I think it can be widely used to describe many different things, but generally when you have one, just like a satori experience. And they can become more and more prominent as you get older, or less and less, depending on where you have spent your mental time in your life. In other words, if you spend a lot of time just playing sports, drinking, watching TV, never thinking about yourself or your heart or your deeper most needs or wants, and never really considered other people, and then all of a sudden one day you have the spiritual awakening, well, then epiphanies can just come tenfold. They just come and come, keep coming, until eventually you have had all these awarenesses. My point being that when I was younger, I would have these amazing awarenesses, and as I got older, they tended to fade away. Not because I wasn't paying attention, but because somebody would point out something. I'd be in a conversation with somebody, let's say, somebody, maybe we're on mushrooms, or maybe we're dead sober, whatever it may be, maybe a few beers, but somebody just has this moment of, dude, do you realize that, that we're all just being controlled in this world, that it's all this, or that there might be aliens, basically stories that I've already gone through in my mind a million times that are just kind of like the entry level awakenings, if you will. And I'm trying hard to describe this without classifying it as saying, okay, here's a level of awakening. But when you have a certain awareness, that opens up the door for new awarenesses. Until you realize that you have to love and know yourself first, you can't go further. Yet when you start to go further from that, until you realize that even though you have to love yourself, you can't be an egotistical asshole or arrogant, then you have that awakening, or I should say I had the awakening, okay, and then I realized I can't be an asshole, but then I also realized that there's a time to be an asshole, and there's a time to be kind, there's a time to be happy, and a time to be sad. Whoa, loud. Finding these things is really key to my life, to discover new awakenings. So here I've spent 6 minutes describing, what I mean by an awakening. Now I guess I can get to the point. I was up at the park, and the kids were playing, and my wife was up there. We picked up my son from school, and they were playing on the playground structure. And I had my dog, and we kind of walked up into the grass, and I walked over, and I stood in this beam of sunlight coming through the trees, and just looked up at the sun with my eyes closed, and just took it in. And I was picturing myself absorbing as much sunlight as I possibly could at that time, because I had had such little exposure lately. And all at once I realized that if I want to will my body to take in more sunlight or absorb more sunlight, why shouldn't I be able to do that? And it led me through, I guess, an entire plethora of many different ideas and thoughts that all passed through my head at once. And you know how that works, I'm sure. And the conclusion I came to in that short few seconds was that I'm in control of what I decide to think. I've been able to program my mind to think more positively. I'm always seeing the good in situations now, yet not ignoring the bad. I'm basically doing this to be a happier person, and to make those around me more happy, and to be able to be the guy that can bring the positive out in a situation and do my best, because negativity ultimately never won me anything. Negativity was nothing more than a pity act, and when people act negative, it attracts negative attention. So, I chose to be positive. Point being that I believe that we're in full control of our thoughts and our emotions, and we can change our minds if we choose to do. Well, something else amazing came into my thought at the same time, that I'm in control of my arms, and the fact that I can move my arms, the fact that I can move my legs and my digits, and manipulate this body in itself shows that I have control over not only my mind, but also my outer body. And then I thought, how far does this extend? When we talk about the environment and whether we affect it, you can go back to the observer effect or the double slit experiment, where scientists are still baffled with the double slit experiment, because light behaves as either a particle or a wave depending on if it's being observed or not. So it appears that human observation affects the outcome of something minute. So here we have the fact that we can control our minds, we can control our bodies, we can control something with an atomic structure by observing it, and I realized I can manipulate my environment around me. I can pick up things, I can move things. So we can influence the external world, even if it's through using our hands, because our hands are ultimately just an extension of our minds. And at the same time I realized this is absolute proof to me that we are also in control of our bodies on the cellular level. And it brought me back to thinking about placebo effect, and how many amazing experiments have happened where people were cured by a drug that wasn't even a drug during a placebo trial. Whereas some people had taken the real drug and died of cancer because they didn't believe it would work. There are some amazing studies of this. There was one guy who got cancer. He was given a pill by his doctor, and it was working, and then the doctor found out that the pills, they'd found out it didn't work. So when the guy came in the next time, he told the guy, yeah, apparently these pills, they say they don't work. Within a week, his cancer was back, and he was sick as a dog. So then the doctor tried something, and told the guy, actually they do work. They found out it was a different drug that didn't work. Cancer went away. Then the guy went and read an article, found out the doctor was lying, and the cancer came back. And there are so many reports of this, but it's anecdotal evidence. It's nothing that can be proven over and over repeatedly, because it's hard enough to get repeatable scientific experiments on what drugs do to people, how they're affected by their environments, different things that affect us when people do studies on groups of smokers or groups of drinkers or groups of dopers or groups of thinkers, whatever it may be, the people are individuals. You cannot classify them as a group. And the extraneous, external influences in our life, it's very difficult to gauge that. And especially with people's dishonesty about not only their true actions and consumption patterns, but their true feelings and how they really view the world in their subconscious mind as well as their conscious mind. So, this has been a long way of saying that I truly believe that humans are capable of curing ourselves of whatever ails us. There are herbs, there are medicines, there are ideas that can assist with this, but they're really catalysts to try to help us to improve ourselves. Some of the, I had a discussion with somebody earlier who had said that basically all drugs are bad, and I said, well, you have to be able to separate drugs from plants, and you can't, because 25% of the drugs on the market are extracted from plants, and 80% of the drugs on the market are at least a synthetic representation of a plant compound that was found. Drugs don't just appear overnight. These are natural compounds that have been known for a long time. So it's not like the plants are a delusion, but I heard this one fella say to me that herbs are all just psychological when you think they're working, and he used a couple of examples, talked about homeopathy, and I said, no, see, science has caught up to the reality that the plants contain substances which assist us in supplementing the natural compounds that exist within our bodies, such as anandamide, which is similar to THC, or endorphins, which is nothing more than endogenous morphine, which just means morphine the body produces. Morphine isn't something wild and crazy, it's just something that's similar to something we use for pain. And dopamine, serotonin, and all these precursor chemicals, and the way that they all interact together is a very complicated issue, and herbs are not the answer. Herbs are just one tool that a person can use. But the true wisdom lies in being able to eventually get yourself to a state of mind where you're functional when you want to be functional, where your state of mind is conducive to the way you want to live. And this doesn't mean being completely coherent all the time either. And that's a major important point, I think. It doesn't mean that you have to be on top of your game all the time. If you want to be on top of it for half your day, and then in the evening be able to get stoned or drink and, get a little stupid, then that's fine. Don't beat yourself up over what you choose, because that's basically an unloading. When you put a lot of time and love into something, like thinking, and I mean this seriously, as what I consider myself, I guess, a philosopher, but I don't like to associate myself as that word, because it assumes an armchair philosopher, someone who just sits and thinks about shit. I do a lot of research. I do a lot of informative digging to figure out what's really going on, because I'm not going to delude myself and come up with old philosophies that somebody already did. But many of these are enduring, and they are beneficial. They are philosophies that can help us understand ourselves and our world. And the ultimate one is the mental alchemy, being able to convert your thoughts, transmute your lead thoughts into gold. And it's the ultimate secret. The biggest secret is the power of the mind to control our thoughts, and therefore control our body. So rather than yelling at your body to heal itself or trying to fix something, what you're doing is you're telling your brain, I need you to do this for me. It's difficult to explain because, of course, anything you do and you're using the brain, But I mean being conscious of the fact that you are in control of your brain. Picture your brain. Close your eyes for just a minute and visualize your brain sending out signals. When I'm feeling ill or hurt, I will sit and concentrate on an area to get the pain to go away. And often it works. I don't question it. It's just something where I believe that pain is something that the body uses to tell you, hey, there's a problem here. But it's your job to find the switch to turn it off. That's the thing. We still have these primal instincts and these primal minds which, have some very, archaic ways of thinking and doing. And only recently have we developed things like manners and rules and regulations to try to figure out, how we can make a life that's conducive to everyone's happiness. And it's a very difficult thing to do because those primal thoughts still come up. So we have to stop them and conquer them and harness them and realize them for what they are. But like everything, you don't block anything. Don't block negative thoughts. Don't block weird ideas or weird thoughts, because blocking anything just puts up a wall. You want to let it flow through you. You want to let it enter your mind, figure out what you can do with it, and move on. And then you start to picture yourself as a conductor of ideas, instead of just being a person in a world, or someone who's at the mercy of others. You're a free agent to do whatever you feel. You're able to ebb and flow with the tides and jump into anything without feeling threatened by it. I mean, the ultimate growth I've had in my life has been to realize that anytime I feel resistant to something, or I don't think it's possible, it's time to look closer at it. And that's how I felt today with my epiphany about the controlling of the body. I've spent years trying to convince myself of many of these things, because a lot of this is subjective experience. And it's difficult for a person to say, hey, this really works. You can heal yourself by thinking about it and have another person actually believe it and take that on faith. It's much like religion, Faith healing, if you will. Faith healing is a very real thing. Since I just said that, I might as well cover that real quick. I don't believe faith healing has anything to do with the healer. I think it has everything to do with the healed. There may be many people who, and I have seen, studies of people who seem to have an electric nature about them. Their hands, there's something, they have a different energy, and there are probably healing people in the world, but for most of the people who consider themselves healers, like the pastors and the evangelists, of course they're not doing anything. The people who are convincing themselves, and this is what we need to do more often. Instead of being afraid of convincing ourselves of something, if it's beneficial to us, then don't worry about being illogical or not being able to prove it. Because if it does benefit you, then embrace it for what it is. So, those are my thoughts for the night, and I hope you enjoyed. Have a great day.